8 hours. For 8 hours, on December 17th, 2025, former Special Counsel Jack Smith sat in a secure room on Capitol Hill and told Republican lawmakers exactly what evidence he had gathered against President Donald Trump. He detailed classified documents hidden in bathrooms and ballrooms. He described a criminal conspiracy to overturn an election. He presented phone records showing Trump's coordination with members of Congress during the January 6th attack. And he delivered the bombshell statement that would dominate headlines. If asked whether to prosecute a former president based on the same facts today, I would do so regardless of whether the president was a Republican or Democrat. But here's what made Jack Smith's testimony truly explosive. Americans weren't allowed to hear it. House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan, who had spent months demanding Smith's testimony, who had issued a subpoena to compel his appearance, suddenly decided this testimony was too sensitive for public consumption. The hearing would be closed door. The video would remain sealed. 2 days later, on December 19th, Smith's attorneys fired back with a letter that cut through Republican spin. Mr. Smith welcomes the opportunity to testify about Trump's alleged unlawful retention of classified documents, obstruction of justice, and role in attempting to overturn the results of the 2020 election in an open and public hearing. They demanded immediate release of the full video recording, warning that selective leaks would distort Smith's testimony. The battle over Jack Smith's testimony reveals everything about Trump's second-term strategy for rewriting history. This wasn't about protecting classified information. This was about preventing Americans from hearing a decorated career prosecutor explain, under oath and on camera, why he believed Donald Trump committed federal crimes serious enough to warrant prosecution. Jack Smith never wanted to be a household name. For 3 decades, he had built a reputation as one of America's most effective prosecutors. He had prosecuted war crimes at The Hague, led the Justice Department's Public Integrity Section, securing convictions of corrupt politicians from both parties. When Attorney General Merrick Garland appointed him special counsel in November 2022, Smith inherited 2 of the most politically sensitive investigations in American history. By August 2023, Smith had secured 2 federal indictments against Trump. The classified documents case detailed how Trump retained highly sensitive materials at Mar-a-Lago, showed them to visitors without clearances, stored them in a bathroom and ballroom, then obstructed federal efforts to retrieve them. The January 6th case laid out a criminal scheme to overturn the 2020 election through fraud, coercion, and violence. Then Trump won the 2024 election. By Justice Department policy, a sitting president cannot be prosecuted. Smith was forced to wind down both investigations. But Trump's re-election didn't just end the prosecutions. It triggered a systematic purge. The new administration fired career prosecutors who had worked on Smith's team, FBI agents who investigated Trump, even support staffers. Trump declared Smith a criminal who should be investigated and put in prison. Into this atmosphere walked Jim Jordan with a subpoena, announcing the House Judiciary Committee would investigate Smith for prosecutorial misconduct. Congressional oversight isn't unusual. Robert Mueller appeared publicly in 2019. Robert Hur testified publicly in 2024. But when Smith's attorneys indicated their client was willing to testify publicly, Jordan scheduled a closed-door deposition instead. No cameras, no live broadcast. On December 17th, Smith arrived prepared. I made my decisions in the investigation without regard to President Trump's political association, activities, beliefs, or candidacy, Smith told the committee. We took actions based on what the facts and the law required. Then came the bombshell. If asked whether to prosecute a former president based on the same facts today, I would do so regardless of whether the president was a Republican or Democrat. The decision to bring charges against President Trump was mine, but the basis for those charges rests entirely with President Trump and his actions. Smith wasn't apologizing. He was doubling down. Given the same facts, he would prosecute Trump again. Party affiliation be damned. A direct refutation of Trump's defense that Smith's prosecutions were politically motivated. Smith detailed his evidence. He told the committee his team had developed proof beyond a reasonable doubt that Trump engaged in a criminal scheme to overturn the 2020 election. He explained how his team uncovered powerful evidence that showed Trump willfully retained highly classified documents and how Trump repeatedly tried to obstruct justice to conceal his continued retention. Perhaps most explosively, Smith defended obtaining phone records from Republican members of Congress. GOP Senator Chuck Grassley had alleged the FBI obtained phone data from 8 Republican senators and 1 House member during the January 6th investigation. Republicans claimed political targeting. Smith's response was devastating. January 6th was an attack on the structure of our democracy in which over 100 heroic law enforcement officers were assaulted. Over 160 individuals later pled guilty to assaulting police officers that day. Exploiting that violence, President Trump and his associates tried to call members of Congress in furtherance of their criminal scheme, urging them to further delay certification. The phone records weren't obtained because Republicans were Republicans. They were obtained because Trump called those specific members during the Capitol attack. I didn't choose those members, Smith said. President Trump did. Outside the closed hearing room, Democratic lawmakers emerged with barely contained excitement. Representative Jamie Raskin delivered the most damning assessment. Chairman Jordan made an excellent decision in not allowing Jack Smith to testify publicly, because had he done so, it would have been absolutely devastating to the president and all the president's men involved in the insurrectionary activities. Think about what Raskin was saying. Jordan's decision wasn't about protecting classified information. It was about protecting Trump from public exposure to evidence against him. Multiple Democrats told reporters Smith's testimony should be made public immediately. But Jordan wasn't budging. When asked about a public hearing, he said only that he hadn't ruled it out. Washington speak for absolutely not. His strategy was transparent. Control the narrative by controlling access to Smith's testimony. The problem became apparent immediately. By keeping testimony secret while attacking Smith's credibility, Republicans created the impression they were hiding something explosive. If Smith's testimony showed prosecutorial misconduct, why not broadcast it? On December 19th, Smith's attorneys sent their formal letter to Jordan requesting public testimony and full video release. This will ensure that the American people can hear the facts directly from Mr. Smith, rather than through secondhand accounts. The letter put Jordan in an impossible bind. If he refused, he would be explicitly blocking public testimony he himself had demanded. If he agreed, Smith would dismantle Republican attacks in front of the entire nation. Smith's attorneys made clear they understood Republicans were preparing selective, misleading leaks. They were preemptively offering full transparency. As of December 19th, Jordan hadn't responded. But his silence spoke volumes. Every hour without scheduling a public hearing was another admission that Republicans feared what Americans would hear. The battle intersected with other scandals. December 19th was also the deadline for DOJ to release Epstein files under a law Trump had signed. When the deadline passed with only partial releases, Democrats accused Trump of breaking his own law. The pattern was identical. Promises of transparency followed by obstruction. For Smith, the aftermath carried serious risks. Trump had called him a criminal who should be in prison. The administration had fired his team. There were suggestions of disbarment or criminal investigation. These threats created a chilling precedent. If prosecutors could be investigated for bringing cases against powerful politicians, future prosecutors would think twice before investigating political figures. But Smith showed no signs of backing down. His "I would do it all again" statement wasn't just defiance. It was a declaration that evidence justified prosecution regardless of consequences. By insisting on public testimony and refusing to apologize, Smith was forcing Republicans to either allow him to present evidence or admit they were suppressing it. The question lingering over Washington was simple. What was in Smith's 8-hour testimony that Republicans were so desperate to hide? The answer was obvious. Smith's testimony told a story Republicans couldn't refute: that Donald Trump had committed serious federal crimes, that evidence was overwhelming, and that prosecutions were entirely justified. Jim Jordan understood that if Americans heard that story directly from Smith, the witch hunt narrative would collapse. So, Jordan did what authoritarians do when faced with inconvenient truth. He suppressed it. He kept testimony secret, controlled the narrative, and hoped Americans would trust his characterization rather than demanding evidence themselves. Whether that strategy would succeed remained an open question. But one thing was certain: Jack Smith wasn't going away quietly. His demand for public testimony, his refusal to apologize, and his willingness to say, "I would do it all again," guaranteed the fight over Trump's accountability would continue. The stakes extended beyond Trump's personal legal jeopardy. This was about whether America would remain a nation where no one is above the law, or whether presidents could escape accountability by winning re-election and purging everyone who investigated them. It was about whether career prosecutors could follow evidence wherever it led, or whether they would be intimidated into silence. Jack Smith had made his choice. He had followed the evidence, brought charges based on what he believed was overwhelming proof, and now faced retaliation. He was demanding the opportunity to explain his work to the American people in a public forum where his words couldn't be selectively edited. The question was whether Jim Jordan and House Republicans would allow Americans to hear that explanation, or whether they would continue to hide testimony that, in Jamie Raskin's words, would be absolutely devastating to the president they were determined to protect. As 2025 drew to a close, that question remained unanswered, hanging over Washington like a sword suspended by the thinnest thread.